Okay, hello everybody. Hello and welcome back once again to this is where the title is not shown on the screen, so I have to
Career
search for it.
Expert
Career Expert
Roundtable.
Roundtable. Yes, thank you, thank you. I need that. I need a prompt. Episode number 38, and with me as always is Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. And this is how to get hired in 2026. So we're a couple of days ahead of the curve, but we're doing this anyway. We have been off the air for about a month, and we're back now. And this is just a reminder to people, this is a Q&A, so that if you are watching this live on my YouTube channel or on Abby's YouTube channel, this is an opportunity for you to ask us questions. We can both see your questions. We can both respond to it, no matter where you're watching this. And if you have a question about careers, job search, any aspect thereof, this is the venue for us to help you with that. So, so get in the chat. And Abby, you are going to kick us off with a topic to get us started here.
Yes. So at least in the United States, the projected rate of unemployment is expected to be pretty low. So the way that I'm going to phrase this is a little odd, but it's expected to peak at about 4.5% in early 2026, which means that we kind of need to have a plan in place on how we might, move forward with switching jobs or job searching in general. With that type of lower percentage of unemployment, that means less people are leaving their jobs and employers are not having as much open jobs available. So it's harder to find work if you're wanting to switch, and it's also harder to find a job if you're currently unemployed and in the job search process. So the question is, should I job search now or kind of wait for a dip in unemployment? And really, the answer that Bill and I think I can safely assume we agree on is always start earlier rather than later when it comes to your job search. So if you are happy in your current position, or you're thinking that you're comfortable but willing to start the job search now, start now. You don't want to wait until you're ready to jump ship and escape your current position. You don't want to wait until you have been let go or something worse has happened. Maybe you get fired or something like that. You want to start the job search now, or at least start prepping for the job search. And there's a couple of ways that you can go about that. I always recommend keeping your resume up to date. So if you haven't updated your resume recently, go to your resume, go to that master document and update it for your current position that you've been in. If you are not currently employed, update it with the things that you've been doing to keep your skills up and keep yourself relevant with this job search. Then, and this is Bill's bread and butter, start to think about who you might be networking with as you start to prepare for this job search. Ideally, you don't just find some random person that you've never talked to before and say, hey, help me get a job, because that's not how networking works. But because you might be having some lead time on this and some time to prepare for this job search, you can be more intentional about who you're going to contact, how you start building a rapport and relationship with that person, what organizations you might start looking into. So think about the networking perspective, and Bill and I can go on tangents with networking, which I'm sure we're going to come back to at some point.
We go off on a tangent and never come back. Yes.
Watch some of our videos that are all about interviewing, so you can start to prepare for the interview process. There's a lot of questions that are commonly asked during the interview process that may not be verbatim the same for every organization, but are similar themes. Like every interview usually starts off with an introductory question, like, tell me about yourself. Tell me why you're interested in this job. Tell me what you know about our organization, something like that.
So people have a love and hate relationship with those introductory questions. I think it's the number one source of confusion or anxiety, like how to respond to things like, tell me about yourself. I think at least that's what seems to show up in polls, like public opinion polls, whenever I do them on my YouTube channel. That's like people, they still have the greatest uncertainty around those, I guess, because they're so general,
Yeah, and they can be your own worst enemy. They can start your interview off on a really great foot or on a terrible foot.
Yeah, and you're right. Like you're also making a first impression with how you answer the first question, and as you said, it sets the tone for where the interview goes from there. So I guess the pressure is really on. It's not, maybe I shouldn't marvel at it the way that I do, that people have the greatest anxiety around those types of questions. But anyway, just something I wanted to throw out there.
Well, and I actually just met with a client last week who was saying that they felt like during their interview, it was an in-person interview, they were observing the panel. There were 3 different people who were part of the interview for their specific interview. And one of the people, who was probably the primary decision maker, had appeared to make up their mind about this candidate during the interview process, stopped taking notes, kind of put their paper to the side and just like listened, and didn't really seem that engaged. So what that tells you as listeners is that people will make the judgment about you and determine if you're a good fit for the role or not pretty early on in the interview process. And if they just decide that you're not the right person, then they are not going to put a lot of effort into the interview process. That judgment usually occurs in the first 2 to 5 minutes of an interview. So you have to make a good first impression as early as possible. It's possible to redeem yourself as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know what your opinion on that is. I'd like to think that it is possible. If you notice this, like what you're saying right now, you're saying you notice them do this. So you kind of tuned into that and you say, okay, it seems like they've maybe made up their mind on it. But, if you decide, okay, well, it doesn't seem like a favorable response, maybe I really need to up my game here. I need to deviate from what I'm doing, in some way. I'd like to think that it's still possible to salvage a situation. Maybe not in every instance, but most of the time, I'd like to think it is. So I'm not sure if people agree. I don't know if that's. It seems like that's kind of unknowable. I don't know if there's any way to find that out, but I'd like to think it is.
And I would, I think I'm in a position where I tend to have more rose-colored glasses on when it comes to the job search and interview process, because I, as a, historically, I was a recruiter and worked in human resources. I like to think that people will have the best intentions and not make up their mind and their judgment about someone until, that it's time to make a decision.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is, especially with people who don't interview frequently, which is the majority of interviewers, they do things that you cannot predict. And in this situation, it sounds like even though my client had attempted to recover during the interview process and answer questions that might be more tailored to this person's, preferences and the position that they're in, it didn't work. And so it's likely that this person had made up their mind and kind of maybe even tuned them out and stopped listening. And they were, more harshly or severely judging this other person's responses and questions. I just was unfortunate that happens. I like to think that candidates can recover from this sort of thing happening during the interview process by being more specific with their responses, or, trying to really hone in on the person who has disengaged to rebuild that relationship and that rapport with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like, you having seen signs of this occurring, and you decide, okay, well, I need to try and reverse this. The thing obviously is to change something. You have to change what you're doing, presumably, right? So you made some suggestions a moment ago that those could be actual things. You could engage with that person more, and maybe ask them a question if there's an opportunity to do so, and say what do you think is the most important? They ask you, I don't know, they ask you a question about the job, or they ask you a question about something, and then you give a response to it, and then you maybe turn to that individual and say, what do you think is, the ideal thing in this case? If you're asking me how this job should be done, and I've answered that, I say I would approach it this way. You can then turn to that person and say, well, what do you think? Is there something that you've noticed where, you would prefer someone handle it this way or that way, and get their take and get them to engage more? Maybe that could affect the change that would get them to change their mind about you and reconsider you. I mean, what else could one do? Be more warm and friendly, maybe, if they felt that they were being a little too reserved and clinical about stuff. I mean, you need to change something up. So I don't know what other possibilities there might be.
Usually my first reaction to that type of question that you just asked, Bill, is what you've already mentioned, which is try to engage with that person, getting them to speak a little bit more. This goes back to one of my most popular videos on questions to ask at the end of the interview, where you then ask questions to the interviewer. From a psychological perspective, people feel better about themselves when they do more talking. So if you can
Yeah.
get the interviewer talking more towards the end of your interview, they usually feel like the interview went better because they feel better about themselves from sharing their personal experiences and things like that. So maybe you pivot in the middle of the interview and you start engaging with this person to get them to talk a little bit more, rather than the traditional mindset around interviews, which is you as the interviewer ask me the questions, me as the candidate, I just respond.
Yeah.
If we can make it a little bit more conversational, that could turn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think everybody finds it flattering to a degree when somebody says, what do you think? And you feel that they genuinely care about what you have to say, and they do want to know what your opinion is. They're not just doing it as a performative thing to make you feel like they care about what you think, but they are genuinely interested. I think most people respond well to that too. So that might be another thing, if there's an opportunity to do it, and get their opinion on stuff, and it makes them feel more engaged and they warm to you.
Yeah. And if you
Absolutely.
notice that while you're giving a response to their question, that they start to disengage, or they look confused, or they look like they're not interested any longer, you could even follow up on your response of saying, like, did that answer your question? Or, it seems like I might be missing something. Is there anything that you want me to clarify? Just to re-engage them specifically and kind of let them know that you're in tune with their, facial expressions and their affect and what might be going on for them, that you're not just a robot here to respond to questions.
Yeah, it always amazes me, and I know I'm not the only one. It always amazes me how much job interviews are about that kind of thing. It's one would think that it's about your qualifications and your work experience and all that kind of stuff, but it really isn't. It's about the type of person you are, how it feels to them to interact with you, because the logic is that if they're going to employ you and you're going to be around, you're going to be interacting regularly every day, and if it feels awkward or it feels off-putting, or they're just getting weird vibes, that really is going to kill your chances of being selected, much more so than like, oh no, you don't have some slight technical qualification that we would prefer. It really is about that kind of interpersonal stuff. I think that throws a lot of people that certainly are like me, the more technical people, the more introverted people. I think they're in living hell when they realize this stuff. But unfortunately, that's how it goes.
And that's what's so frustrating about like humans in general, is that there's no like rule book that everything always applies. Particularly with interviews, you would think that if I'm interviewing for this position, the things that matter the most is my ability to do the job. But that's one of the things that actually matters the least. Your ability to do the job is usually determined based on your minimum qualifications, which can be determined by a computer before you even speak to someone during the interview process.
Yeah.
The interview process might be to like suss out very specific technical skills that you can't determine by answering questions or your application. But in general, the interview process is truly used to determine how you're going to fit in with the culture of the organization, the culture of the team, what your relationship with the manager or supervisor might be. If it is a very technical job, you still have to interact with other people. And that's generally
absolutely
figure that out.
Yeah. And the thing there, I mean, you I'm sure would know this better than me, because I think you've seen this more, but it's like when people don't work out in an organization, like it's just they need to be terminated, or they quit, or they have major issues with coworkers or bosses or whatever, and it becomes dysfunctional. It's almost always because of like a personality issue or a communication issue or a difference of opinion, and resolving conflict, and like all that kind of stuff, like the touchy feely kind of stuff. It's never because of like, oh, we thought you were qualified to do the job. It turns out that you're woefully unqualified. You physically can't do the job. Like you just don't know what you're doing. We're going to have to let you go. That's very rare. It's usually some issue with interpersonal interaction. So that's why, like, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that job interviews, they're evaluating on that kind of stuff, and seeing how well you're going to fit in and how agreeable you are, and like stuff like that. It's
absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. Well, there are a small number of times that it doesn't work out because someone literally just can't do the job, even though they're a great personality fit for the role. Majority of the time, is because they are a terrible personality fit for the role. And
Yeah, it's not that
personality,
they're a bad person. It just that it doesn't click. It's just incompatible. Yeah.
yeah, and that
And
personality aspect is like how you get along with people, how you communicate, how you problem solve and critically think about things. You could be the nicest person in the world, get along with everyone, but if you just can't do things for yourself and you aren't resourceful and you constantly have to ask other people for questions or get other people to do the work for you, that's also not going to work out. So it's very
yeah,
that all this process, the interview process, is like, I would say 99% of it is to determine if you as a person are a good fit for the role beyond just your technical abilities and ability to do the job. And
absolutely. I think
a
it
lot
throws a lot of people when they realize this. Yeah.
yeah. So it can be really frustrating. But it looks like we've got a question. Yep, in the chat. Thanks to Lexington Daniel for coming into our live stream and asking us a question. So
Lexington Daniel, that's like Macintosh Fred. Here we go. Let's see. I found you while you were on break and went through previous streams. Heaps of great info. Well, great. You're obviously a person of impeccable taste, Lexington
yes,
Daniel. Yeah, it's great to see that people have such discernment. They see talent. They spot talent when they see it. But Daniel also has a question here. It says, I've been doing targeted outreach, contacts, a role in professional org. It seems that spray and pray applications have been getting most interviews. Maybe time of year has something to do with that. Do you want to take this, Abby? Like the spray and pray thing? That's like where you just apply to everything with more generic type applications, as I understand it, right? That's what that
Yep.
is.
Yep. And it might depend on the industry that you are applying to, maybe even the types of roles, like hierarchy in the organization. Are they more entry level? Are they more senior level? This I found that in general, organizations that are just interviewing everyone, with the spray and pray or type of technique that you might be using, where you're getting a lot more interviews, they might be having a hard time finding the right fit. And it's because they are being too specific with the type of person that they're wanting to hire. And so they end up just interviewing a ton of people. And this is a lot of organizations go through this. So forgive me for the tangent that I'm about to go on. But
This
they're
is
looking for a
interesting.
unicorn. Yeah, they're looking for a unicorn and they're not finding it. So then they end up interviewing everyone who comes through to try to find the perfect fit. But then those interviews don't end up working out for anyone. Obviously, the candidates don't get moved forward through the hiring process and then they don't hire anyone. But it's because they're looking for too specific of a person that really doesn't exist. And so spray and pray works to some extent. I think that it isn't a long-term viable option for a job in an organization that's going to be a great fit for you. If you just need to find a job and anything works, you don't really care about culture or the total compensation package or the specific work that you're doing, like you could just do anything. Spray and pray typically works because you can apply to a lot higher number of job openings that are available. As you get to be a little bit more nuanced in the type of work that you do, in the industry that you're in, with the specialties or level in the organization, then that's when the spray and pray doesn't work as much. Primarily because you are not putting as much effort into your applications. It's not realistic to assume that you're going to be able to spend an hour plus on every single application that you're doing if you're applying to hundreds of applications or jobs every single week. You just don't have that type of ability to do those, really quality applications. I don't think you should never do spray and pray. I think that, you probably want to pick a couple of applications that you want to spend extra time on. And then, you can spend hours on updating your resume and being very specific about a cover letter that you submit. And then there's maybe some other jobs that you want to get, just your foot in the door. And that position itself isn't more long-term, but maybe there's career growth in the organization or it's a stepping stone for you. And you don't have to spend as much time on the general application process. So it's kind of a balance. You don't want to focus exclusively on spray and pray because then the quality of all your applications is low, but you also don't want to be exclusively way too picky because then the job search process can take years just because you can't find a job.
Yeah, like my understanding is that spray and pray thing where you just blast out application that really doesn't work. Like it's not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with these things is that everything works some of the time. Like, so,
Yeah.
some ridiculous thing is going to work some of the time, but generally it's not the right approach. The one thing it has in its favor is that, there's like multiple leads, right? So, I mean, that's good. But, the problem is if the quality of those leads is universally not very good.
Mhm.
The only things it's good for is something where they're just looking for people, you
Yeah.
know? So you just happen to land in their lap, they're not super picky. What you happen to have is fine, and you go ahead. So, but generally, like it begs the question, what is the right thing to do? And I would say, it's kind of a weird answer. It's like you have to take a quality approach and a quantity approach.
Yeah.
So you want to pursue leads. The more leads you pursue, the better.
Mhm.
But the better, like the more work you put into each lead to make it as promising as possible is also better too, right? So you need to do an abundance of leads done properly, so
Mhm.
that means in practical terms, customizing your resume, customizing your application, but not just doing one or two of those, like doing as many of them as you possibly can do. That's
Yeah.
why AI tools are so useful, because they allow you to do the customization, and it makes it very efficient. So you can do a lot of those in a day.
Absolutely. And just on the very last piece of this kind of
Mhm.
comment that Daniel added in, maybe time of year has something to do with that. Yes, this time of year, I would say probably end of October to through end of the year, end of December, there are less applicants in the job market because most of the applicants are assuming that there's not going to be as many job postings available, that people will be on holiday or vacation and will not be responsive. But a lot of organizations are trying to actually ramp up their recruiting so they can have people start at the beginning of the year. So if you have been applying over the last couple of months, you may have noticed an increase in responses from organizations because there's been an overall decrease in applicants. So this isn't something that you would likely experience all year, but that is something that is unique to this time of year. I do think that
That's
this
interesting.
specific 2 week period at the end of December, here in the United States in particular, is going to be a lower response rate because people will take off time for Christmas and for New Year's. And these holidays have fallen in the middle of the week. So that's kind of disruptive to the work week in general. If it was like on a Monday or a Friday, that might be different when it comes to response times. But because these are on Wednesdays and Thursdays, there's maybe fewer people in the office and less response time. So we'll see how the end of the year pans out for people. But I do think the timing and the season that we're in right now, less applicants, which means higher rates of responses from organizations and recruiters.
Yeah, and that's an unintuitive thing also, because one would expect it to drop off, but it doesn't, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
We've got some other questions here. Red the Show says, "Good to see you both. Hope you had a great Christmas and holidays. I did an interview 2 weeks ago, and I was horrible and struggled. I thought I was going to get rejected." Okay, but it continues. However, the next day they asked for my references from the last employer, the supervisor. Is this a good sign, even though I did bad? I'm located in San Francisco Bay Area. I would say that's a good sign. I mean, I think you can see that's a good sign. If they rejected you outright, it would just end there. They might ghost you, or they wouldn't ask for more information. There's no way to tell if like where you are in the running. I mean, all you can do is give them what they're asking for, and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
The only real thing you have control over is how you respond to it. So I don't think under any situation you would not respond to it or do anything else. So yeah, just it seems like you're still in the running. Just pursue it, and hopefully it works out.
Yep, I would agree. And I would say that you might think you did terribly, and they might think the exact opposite. Like, wow, this person is the best fit for this role that we found so far. We need to snatch them up as quickly as possible. So, even though, and this is where we, again, can be our own worst enemy. I might suddenly think that I'm like reading the room and people are not interested, and I start then spiraling and not answering the questions well, when that was not the case at all. They were engaged and they were listening and they were, taking notes on my responses. And so we want to try to read the room as accurately as possible and also give ourselves some grace. So it sounds like you're being pretty hard on yourself when it comes to your interview performance, but they didn't think it was terrible. If you had a terrible interview, they probably wouldn't move forward with you. At the same time, maybe they're like, oh, like this person struggled a little bit, but we know they have the qualifications, and we really like how they showed up and like pushed through their interview. And that was a really great way for us to see their resilience and their persistence with this process. So even though things might feel like they're going sideways, it doesn't necessarily always mean that they will end up worst case scenario with that rejection. So congrats on potentially being moved to the next stage of the reference check.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to put two facts together. One, with regard to the whole like perception of how well we do in a job interview. Two things. Number one, we don't have an objective view of our own ability to give a first impression. Like, we just have no idea what kind of first impression we're making, least of all to somebody who's got their own opinions and preferences and, history. Yeah. So we have no clue. So if you go off your feelings, like, okay, I don't think I did very well, my understanding is that those are largely inaccurate because you have no idea how the other person is perceiving you. Secondly, even if, like in this case with Read the Show was saying, I felt that I did quite poorly. The thing is, once again, that is not an indicator of how well you did and what the impression was to the other person because, for example, maybe they viewed you were maybe stumbling a bit and kind of searching for words and hesitating and you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm blowing this, but they're thinking like, wow, I've interviewed 5 people before you and they all gave these very polished, very rehearsed, very crafted performances. It's great to see someone real, like, that's actually being
Human.
more honest and like I'm seeing more of who they actually are. And I like that. They're not just, presenting some facade to me that like I really don't know who they are. So I like the fact that I know who you are more. You're being a bit more real with me. So in that case, you might feel really bad about it, but the other person is thinking, "Wow, this is the best candidate so far." So you have no idea how you're gonna go over. So going on how it feels is often a very poor indication of how you're actually going over.
Yep. I have nothing to add other than just saying I completely agree.
Well, good. We're in agreement. We got some more questions here. So our good, close personal friend, Lexington Daniel says, leader/director level L&D, like leadership and development.
Okay. I think learning and development, yeah.
Learning and development in multinationals. Mm-hmm. The more generic applications have been landing 1+ interviews per week with household name level code. Wow. Well, that's a pretty good performance. If it's getting you like 1 interview a week, by doing this, that's, I think, above the average that a lot of people get. So either you're extremely in demand and you've got some rare skills, or you're just like an absolute whiz in your process that you're doing. So,
yep. And this goes back to maybe time of the year, lower levels of applicants, like lower amounts of people applying to the job. So your application, while maybe seemingly generic, is still standing out among the smaller pool of applicants. And then the other thing that Bill had brought up earlier is that you do want to have both quality and quantity of applications. If you are just focusing on 2 or 3 quality applications a week, you're going to have a significant lower number of responses back to those applications. So you do want to ramp up the number of applications you're doing while with also maintaining the quality. And the way to do that is using AI. So you can use, Grok, which is my preference right now, or ChatGPT, or there's lots of other programs out there to help tailor bullet points and help you write a more tailored cover letter. Again, while always going back and making sure you edit it and for accuracy and it's not hallucinating and making up information.
Yeah, proofread. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look for some of the telltale signs of AI usage, like the really long dash that people don't typically use when they're, writing or typing on the computer. But you want to make sure that you can make it a process that is helping you work smarter, not harder, to still have that high level of quality while also being able to increase the quantity that you're submitting.
Absolutely. What other, you mentioned like the long dash. What other things do you know of? The only other one I know of is like ChatGPT. It has this style where it says, it's not this, it's this, it's not that, it's that. Like it kind of those contrasts constantly. That's the only other one I'm aware of. Is there like a whole bunch? Do you know how that works?
Off the top of my head, no.
Hmm.
Because, and this is what's tough about it, at least from a computer perspective, is you don't want to make up information. But if I'm doing the editing process, then it's still going to have a human element to it, which
Yeah.
makes it, way more like if a computer were to analyze it and say this was written by AI, it's likely because you didn't edit it, you didn't proofread it, you didn't do any of these things. But if you go
Yeah.
back and you maybe change some of the words or phrases, or you tweak the numbers that are being used and you delete that really long dash, there are some things that you can do to reduce it from being like flagged as an AI generated application.
Yeah, and I would say like that's my gut feeling. Like when you get ChatGPT or something to like write something, it's very verbose. It tends to use 200 words to say something you could have said in like 80 words. That's kind of my general impressions. I'm not sure if that's like a indicator of AI, but that's something I tend to notice.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree with your answer there. That's so Daniel, and then we have my 2 cents says, what do you suggest for people with a 5-year gap in their resume? Uh,
Well,
I have a
if
suggestion, but I'm interested in hearing what Abby's suggestion is.
Yeah. Well, a 5-year gap in your resume feels like a lot. And at the same time, you likely didn't do nothing in those 5 years. So you've got to figure out how this time, this 5-year time frame, how does it apply to the jobs that you are wanting to apply to? What did you do during this 5-year gap that still sets you up to be successful in this role? Now, when it comes to resumes, most of the time you don't want to use information that is more than 15 years old. So right there, if you have the last 5 years, you're kind of forced to use the 10 years prior to that. And then what else do you add? Hopefully you took some classes, or you volunteered, or you went to conferences, or you did something to continue to keep you up on the industry and the trends and things like that. So that's what I would do, is I would focus on the things that you've done in those 5 years that is relevant to the job that you're applying to. Now, let's say that you wanted to be like a software engineer and you don't have any official software engineer work experience. That might be a little more difficult, but at the same time, there are things that you can start doing now to help set yourself up for success. So, taking refresher courses, there's a lot of free content online. Maybe start using AI, or you try to take a Coursera course, or there's, Google courses that I think are out there as well. So try to bolster your experience from the last 5 years, even though it might not be paid professional experience. What would you add,
Oh,
Bill?
and by the way, I have courses, so you could take my courses when it comes to this kind of stuff. I've got a course called Get Hired, which is like how to do job search. So if you are kind of floundering, you're struggling, it's confusing, you don't know what to do or how to go about looking for a job. I've got a course on that. You can check it out on my channel. I believe if you're watching this on my channel, there's a link to it in the description box under the live stream. I've also got a course called the $100 MBA if you want to learn business. Business is the scientific study of how to make money. That's pretty useful to know for a couple of different reasons. And then I have another course called Write Like a Professional. So if you want to improve your communication skills, it'll allow you to be viewed as a contender to move upward in your career. If you're wanting to climb the ladder, if that's kind of what you have an ambition to do, or it can just help you in life in general to have clear communication, not burn bridges, not turn people off when they have to deal with you, things like this. So check those out. And Abby has some services that you provide, right? I'll let you speak for yourself on those, but check those
Yep.
out.
And if you are watching this on my channel, I've linked to Bill's channel in my description box below. So you can click on that to then access his courses. Yeah, and I offer interview coaching, career coaching, things like that. So while I don't offer courses per se, where you could put these certifications on your resume, I do help people with their resumes in general. I give you some tips, and I can review it with you for a specific application that you might be wanting to put together. We can go over cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, networking strategies, your overall job search strategy, how you're going to search for jobs, how you're going to apply for jobs, how you're going to follow up with people via email, and then also prepare for interviews. So it's, kind of full cycle career search is, where do we go from start to finish? And then also some professional development stuff as well. If you're looking for, leadership development, I offer some assessments that I do with people, like the emotional intelligence inventory, some things on Enneagram, which are like personality assessments.
Is there a scale like from, one extreme to another, like all the way from like the most touchy-feely, emotionally sensitive person you've ever met to like psychopath on the other extreme? Like, does it kind of do that kind of thing?
Not go through those types of things, but it does have like a score. And really the goal is to be as balanced as possible. You want to kind of be in the middle for all of the different outputs that they have for these types of assessments. If you are on the extremes, that's usually indicative of other things going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to understand yourself, and it helps you, I imagine, to relate to other people. Or, if you go to job interviews, which we talk about, I imagine some stuff like that, knowing that about yourself would be extremely useful,
Yeah. Well, and emotional intelligence is one of the most sought after soft skills in any organization, because emotional intelligence ultimately comes down to understanding how your emotions and your response to other people's emotions impact others and vice versa. So if you aren't aware of how you impact other people or how other people impact you, then it's kind of like people are walking on eggshells around you. You come in like a wrecking ball with no awareness of how you might impact them. And you're just wondering why no one likes you. It probably has to do with your emotional intelligence.
That's a good point. I traditionally have to resist the temptation to be dismissive of that stuff, because for the reasons you just said, that illustrates why it's so damn important, and I think a lot of people might have a bit of a blind spot or a lack of respect for that kind of stuff. And it really, really is bad. It really hurts you, you might end up in a situation where, like, you're extremely qualified. You have a lot of skills, a lot of experience. But the thing is, if everyone that has to work with you ends up hating your guts and never wanting to work with you again, that really hurts your career. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it ends up, things like that end up being so much more impactful than at first they might seem, so.
Yes. Well, and like you just mentioned earlier when we were talking with Read the Show, we usually don't have an awareness of how we actually did with other people, because we can't read their minds. We can't actually, understand how they perceive us. And that is an aspect of emotional intelligence as well. So it's, even though I might not be able to read someone's mind, am I aware enough of myself and aware enough of them and what they may or may not be experiencing to be really intentional about how I get along with them and interact with them to build a really positive relationship?
Yeah, I mean, we would all love to do that, right? We'd all love to be able to read other people's minds, be able to see, like, if you're in a job interview, we'd love to know exactly what they think of us in real time, how we're going down, if they're like, thinking that, like, wow, this person's great, or they're thinking like, oh, I don't know what that was about, and then you could correct, or, you know what I mean? Like, we would love to have that ability. And so that's why it's kind of exciting, like learning some of that stuff. So great stuff. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think a lot more people should be aware of that, especially in job search. I mean, this is where you really need that stuff,
Yep. And not to continue the topic necessarily, but the assessment that I am certified in, kind of facilitating and debriefing with people, is like one of the most valid and reliable emotional intelligence questionnaires and assessments out there. So a place that people could start if they're not wanting to put, they might not have hundreds of dollars to spend on assessments and, coaching on that. I'll put a link to my an Amazon book that is Emotional Intelligence 2.0, written by Travis Bradberry. If you buy the book, there's a emotional intelligence assessment that you do at the beginning before you read the book, and then also at the end, about 6 months after you've read the book, to see how you may have grown and developed in your own emotional intelligence. So I'll search that up really quick and put it in the chat.
Okay, sure, yeah. And you're not like affiliated with that at all. This is just a recommendation for people because
Correct.
it's useful. Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yep. Just a book that you can get. It is my Amazon like influencer link. So I do get a small commission from people
Okay.
who buy the
Okay.
book, but I have no affiliation with the book itself.
Yeah, it's great to get suggestions for resources for that stuff. Okay, we have another one here from Karina Martinez says, Bill, thank you for all you do. Currently looking for a job, switching careers. I love all your advice. Thank you. Well, thank you, Karina. You are beautiful. You are awesome. You are wonderful. You're going to work out. You're going to rise above this. You're going to find a job in a career that works for you. It's just a matter of time. And the thing to do is to recognize the process for what it is. It artificially can feel hostile, unwelcoming. It gives us a negative impression of ourselves. We feel sometimes unemployable. We feel sometimes we have no worth. That's all an illusion. This is a process like any other. You figure out how the process works. You do it. You win. That's just how it is. So you're going to be fine, Karina. And I appreciate your words and that you would come back and say that. We got somebody in Cyrillic script here says, "Hi, I'm Russian, and I actually live in Russia." I know it could be a funny question, like "ha funny," but is it possible to find a job in the USA for a foreign guy who just know English and love the USA? Well, back in the day, I had a T-shirt that was bright red with a big yellow hammer and sickle right across the chest. So I'd recommend wearing that and just walk down the streets of New York and say I need a job, and we'll see what happens. Listen, I'm sure it's possible. I can't answer that. Abby's in the U.S. I'm not. So if you want to respond to that, Abby.
Yeah, I think anything is possible. There's a wide variety of jobs that are out there, especially in the United States, where you could, be a great fit. Always when it comes to people who may not live and currently work in the United States, who are trying to get jobs in the United States, there's a whole, like work visa process that I'm not super familiar with that you will have to go through if you are wanting to do that. Follow the laws and the rules so that you can come here legally and work here legally, so that nothing bad happens to you to get put back to where you came from. If it comes to getting a position in the United States, there are even jobs here that don't require that you know English, or even love the United States. But I do think that knowing English and appreciating the United States is probably going to set you up for at least some level of success in your job search. But it's a pretty broad question. I would say anything is possible, though.
Learn the international language of dance. That'll get you far in this current job market.
And I appreciate your little avatar of the Fallout Vault Tech person. So, there's cultural things that you'll be able to fit into well.
I don't understand, but I'm sure it's cultural, that kind of thing. No, I not to like turn this and talk all about me, but no, I remember that shirt. This is the first time I thought of that in 20 years. Me and another guy, we wore these shirts. He had like a shirt that was red with like a big yellow star on it, so more of the kind of Chinese type thing. And we were getting a new boss who was being flown in from the US. So in order to welcome this person, we decided, like being the little jackasses I think we were, that we'd wear these shirts. And it went down as well as you could expect. That really annoyed this conservative guy from the US. So I just remembered that. I always thought it would be funny to get a red sports car, bright red, with a big yellow hammer and sickle across the hood. That would be, nobody would get it, but I would think it's funny. So, like the symbol of capitalism with a big hammer and sickle. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, you had to be there.
A Corvette specifically.
That's right.
An American-made sports car with that on there.
With the tiger skin or the leather, the seats, the dice. Okay, we have My Two Cents says, "Thank you so much for responding. I appreciate the information. We'll look into all you have suggested." Well, good. Hopefully it works out for you, My Two Cents. And thank you for being here and participating. Hopefully what we gave you was somewhat helpful.
Yep. And we've got still some time that we're planning on being here streaming. So for those of you who are currently watching, let us know if you have any other questions about your job search, about your career growth, anything career related. put your
Absolutely. This is primarily a Q&A, so we're here to answer your questions. And the great thing, I think, about doing this is that Abby and I, we have slightly different perspectives on things. We come from slightly different places. So, if you ask a question, you're getting sort of two alternate takes on, on a response to it. So that can also, I think, provide a little bit of value in that respect. So
Yep.
there you go. Okay, we got another response here. OMG, thank you for your response. Well, you're absolutely welcome. That's what we're here for. And I'm glad you have a sense of humor and you didn't totally take everything that I said as some kind of mortal insult or something. So that's good. It's all good. And I wish you best of luck in your effort to get something in the U.S.
So or a little bit earlier, you were asking if I knew of specific indicators that someone might be using AI. So I went and asked AI what some of those indicators might be. So here
clever.
are some of them. If you're doing text-based content, which is what cover letters, resumes, LinkedIn profiles, all of those things kind of fit under. Repetition of structures or ideas. So AI often recycles similar sentence patterns and filler phrases, or repeats the same point without really advancing it with, more in-depth thought.
Okay, yeah.
Unnatural perfection or fluency. So this is something that someone may not pick up on if it's a job application, but if a writer typically has grammar or spelling issues and suddenly it's flawless work that's being submitted, that could be an indicator
this
that
person's writing is too good. What's his angle? Yeah, that's
the
awesome.
prose is maybe overly polished. It like feels too good to be true. That could be an indicator that AI has been at least an assistant in the process. Generic, cliched, or neutral tone. Exaggerated hype, vague attributions, maybe overly balanced, like both sides type thing, lack of emotion or personality. And then internal contradictions or inconsistencies, like the text itself might contradict itself across paragraphs, maybe lack depth or specifics. AI also hallucinates a lot of details, so you'd want to make sure that you are proofreading all of that information.
Absolutely, yeah.
And AI, I always say this, is your first draft or your rough draft. You never want to use what AI has generated for you as your final product. You want to make sure you read through it, you make it in your own voice, your own words. You might use like some of the suggestions it puts out there, but it shouldn't be identical to the original output. You want to make sure that you're adding your human touch to it because that's what makes it feel more human.
Yeah, that's good advice. I like that just having a policy of never using AI generated content as your final thing that you just send on. I think that's a great way to kind of crystallize what we've been talking about. You absolutely need to proofread it.
Yeah, and it can be really tempting to not proofread it and to just take what it generates and use it.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that you don't know all of the content that's being, shared. You don't know if it's completely accurate. You don't know if it's reusing content multiple times and is, duplicating or is too generic or too vague. So there's all this reasoning as to why you should not use the original version that it puts out for you. Use it as a starting place, not a final destination.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Actually, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. We have a couple of more comments here. Seeing Dreams says, "Thank you for all that you do. I recently applied to a company named Axon, and they called to say that if I'm a fit, that they'll email me to set up an interview. That was a couple of weeks ago. Is that okay?" Yep, that sounds okay so far. Right?
Interesting. Yeah. And the fact that they called you and they said, if you're fit, they'll email you to set up an interview. That seems like maybe a little bit backwards in the process for me. It seems like they'd email you first and say, like, thanks for applying. We'll be in touch if you're a fit. They called you. That's interesting. I don't have any qualms with you following up with them. If you have a point of contact, like a person's phone number or an email address from them, following up and saying, hey, just want to check in. I know it's been over the holidays. Just wanted to see if you looked at my application further to determine if I'm a fit for this role. That's totally appropriate. But if they haven't gotten back to you and they said they will get back to you, it also could just be a dead end.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, I agree with Abby. It's not very efficient, but is it like a red flag necessarily? No, I would pursue it, but with suitably low expectations. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, I don't think there's any lead that I would recommend people pursue where it's so important to you that you're worrying about it, you're following up, you're always constantly asking, like, what's going on with that, like where are they at with that, what could they be thinking. you know um, I think that that's, first of all, counterproductive. It's wasted energy. Instead of worrying about past things you've applied for or you've pursued the lead, put your energy into moving forward, to applying for new leads. You know what I'm saying? Discovering new opportunities, pursuing those opportunities. That's what you should put your mental energy into, instead of like worrying about, like, oh no, what's going on with that? And then second guessing yourself. Should I follow up? Should I not follow up? You know what I mean? It's understandable that you feel like that. You're a normal human being for feeling like that. But we've got to try and break out of that and recognize that it's not productive in itself. It may even lead to, how do you put it, Abby? Like a lack of self-esteem. You're kind of not feeling as good about yourself or about how things are going.
Yeah.
It leads to that kind of thinking. So
Yep.
pursue it, but then don't worry about it. Just move on. And if they get back to you, great. If they want to do an interview with you, great. If not, oh well, don't worry about it. Just keep moving forward.
Yes. And this comment specifically says that it was a couple weeks ago that this person or recruiter or company will reach out via email to set up an interview if they're a good fit. A couple weeks ago was like right before the Christmas holiday. So it's possible that things have like slowed down and they're going to get back to you, this week or next week once things, get started into the new year. But you don't want to wait around for them. You want to think about what is within your control. Well, you can either do something about it, like follow up with an email or a phone call to the person who contacted you to begin with, or move on and just wait for them to reach out to you, but not hang on to that and worry about it and have anxiety or anything like that.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but think about what you can control and do that.
Yeah. There's no way of knowing. Like, imagine it wasn't the Christmas holidays or whatever. Like, let's say this happened in, like, August or May or something like that. It's like, for all you know, the recruiter could have gone on vacation for 3 weeks and then come back. So just because you don't hear from them for a while, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's no way to know. It could be like, oh, that's a sign of an absolute hard no. It's not moving forward.
Yep.
Or it could be like totally benign. You're still the number one candidate in the running, and they're on vacation. They're coming back in a week, and they'll pick up from there. There's no way to know. So just don't torture yourself. Just move forward. I know I keep saying that like a broken record, but I think really it is the way to go.
Yeah, and don't take it personal if they don't get back to you. There's a lot of people do take it personal because it feels like they were intentionally ignoring you, or they reached out to you and now they're moving on. Anything can happen. Maybe the recruiter has emailed you or called you, but didn't put it into their like applicant tracking system. And then they had a family emergency or a medical emergency and they're out of the office for the next 3 weeks and no one can get access to what they were working on. So anything could happen. Try not to take it personally. If you get a call from them, an email from them, great. If not, hopefully you've been applying to other jobs and you're setting yourself up for multiple other options to come through.
Yeah, exactly. And Seeing Dreams just asks the actual question.
Yep.
Right here, and says, is it so likely that they'll reach out? Like, there's no way to know. So hopefully that makes sense. And what's the priority for you is that you're pursuing leads, you're pursuing as many as you can, and you're doing as good a job as you possibly can for each one. Right. So it's like almost like an optimization problem. You apply for as many as you can where you still can put in the time necessary to do a good quality application. That's ideally where the sweet spot is for these things. And then don't worry about it. The thing that I say that I don't know if it really resonates with anybody, but for people that have worked in sales or business development, when you do job search, you recognize job search for what it is, because it's extremely similar to business development and sales. Like, it's the same process. You're pursuing all kinds of leads, and it's a numbers game. Like, you know that for every 100 leads I put out there, people I contact or things I apply to, or, communications that I send over whatever channels, for every 100 that I do, I might hear back from maybe 5, 10 tops. Most of them, it just goes into a void, right? And that's like job search. You apply to multiple jobs and, you don't hear anything. Or you hear something back initially and then they ghost you. They stop responding, you know. And this is where, like, a lot of job seekers, they've never encountered that kind of dynamic before, so they kind of freak out and they go, "Oh my God, this is some kind of like insult." Like, what do you mean? You're telling me you're going to get back to me and then you don't, and, like, I feel insulted and disrespected. They're not used to this way of operating. Yeah, but anyone that's been in sales or business development, you recognize this. This is how people behave in the business world, with this stuff, right? So once you realize, this is my point, once you realize that, you realize it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's just another language. This is their language for how they say no. They don't respond, that's
And if you
usually what.
remind yourself that this process is very transactional, it's
Yes.
not personal. It is, you apply, I get back to you, or I don't get back to you. Like, it's very like an exchange of goods and services, essentially. Do you have what I want and need? No, I'm moving on. I think of like all the spam emails I get. I don't respond to every spam email I get and say like unsubscribe or I don't want this. Like, I'm not interested. I like delete it and move on. And that's probably what's happening with a lot of these applications that you might be submitting, is that you don't meet the qualifications or you're not what they're looking for. They move on and they don't get back to you with that. It's unfortunate. I wish it weren't that way. I wish it weren't as transactional. I wish it was a little bit more transformational, but it's just the reality of the kind of culture of job searching.
Yeah. So bottom line, it's like Abby said, it's not meant to be any kind of judgment or, rejection of you as a person or anything. That's not what these people intend in the vast majority of situations. So just keep that in mind. Like, that may help you feel slightly better about things,
Yeah.
and not kind of torture yourself by wondering what these people are thinking or what they're doing. That's just how it goes.
Yep.
Lexington Daniel says, I'm open to remote and relocation. What do you think being open to relocation looks like to an employer? How likely is it someone in Nashville would consider someone from Lexington with relocation? I think you would know a lot more about that than I would, Abby.
Yeah, and I think the easiest, shortest answer is that you can't tell how any employer is going to be about, being for or against relocation. I don't think it will hurt to be open for relocation. When it comes to your resume, is in the United States at least, I don't think you need to put your location on your application, unless it's a requirement for you to be in some sort of area. If you're going to be working for the state of Colorado, you might be required to be a state of Colorado resident, as an example. So in most cases, you don't need to put your location on there. If you would need to relocate or need to work remote, you should be looking for those types of identifying phrases on the job posting. Like, they might pay for relocation or remote is an option. And if it's not on there, but you're a good fit for it, then you can always bring it up during the interview process and just see how they respond. They might not have the budget to pay for you to relocate, but if you're willing to relocate, that's great. I've worked for a couple of organizations that have very low budgets. They put all their money into the salary of a person rather than paying for relocation expenses. And so they don't pay for relocation. But if you're moving from one state to another for a job, if you're willing to move, that's great for them. So it really depends on the organization, their internal policies, their budget, things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. We have one here. Space Flight Dreaming says, what do you recommend for people who are afraid of interviews due to many rejections or almost never actually getting that far in the application process? Ooh. Interesting. You're afraid of interviews because of many rejections, like where you've done interviews and then been rejected, you didn't get an offer.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I think that's a normal human reaction to a large degree. You
I would
shy
agree.
away from it because you've had bad experiences.
Yes.
But take it away, Abby. You're the psychologist and career coach. So
Yeah.
what
So
do you
first of
think?
all, Spaceflight Dreaming. Thanks for chiming in from my Twitch channel. It's someone watching from Twitch.
Hmm.
Um, when it comes to interviewing, first of all, it's a very unnatural process and it's very fabricated. It's you're not going to really be in any interview situation like that in the like job that you're actually going to be doing, and so it feels very
Artificial, yeah.
artificial. Yep. Um, So I think remember that this is a very artificial, kind of fabricated environment where you're expected to really pitch yourself and show up in a certain way. And kind of what Bill and I were talking about before, you can't be too worried about things that you don't control, which is other people, their reactions, their responses, things like that. You want to be focused on what you can control. So if you know that you are anxious, worried, concerned, scared, afraid, whatever the word is that you chooses to use as you go into an interview, that state of mind, state of being can really impact how you show up during the interview process. So, the way that you kind of overcome this is by being prepared, because the more prepared you are, the more confident you will likely feel and appear to the other person. So, how do you prepare? Well, I could go on, for hours about how to prepare for an interview, and I have a ton of different playlists on my YouTube channel about this. But primarily, you want to review the job posting that you've applied to so that you can refresh yourself on what the actual job is that you've applied to. You want to look at the website of the organization to remind yourself what they are and what they do and how you might fit into the organization. You want to review your application. So I recommend printing off your resume, printing off your cover letter, printing off the job posting, going through and highlighting things to refresh your memory. And then you want to practice interviewing. So I recommend using AI systems to generate 30 plus interview questions that you can then practice with by yourself in your mirror, or recording yourself on a, one-way Zoom call where you're recording it by yourself. Or in the perfect situation, you would do a mock interview with someone else. It can be someone else like me, an interview coach, or someone that you know, like a friend or a family member, a coworker, colleague, something like that. The goal is to try to recreate the interview process so that you can practice in a more like realistic setting what it would be like to interview for this specific job. So if you use the job posting and you put it into the AI platform and you say, based on the job posting, please generate X number of interview questions for me, it will use the job posting and ideally create some tailored questions related to what that job actually is. And then you give those questions to someone and you don't look at them, you don't prepare answers for them. And that person will then just randomly ask you, 8 questions from that list. And you can practice giving your responses and get some feedback from that person. Are your questions clear? Are they concise? You don't want to talk for 3+ minutes when you're answering an interview question, but you also don't want to talk for 10 seconds. So you want to make sure that your interview response or the question response is just long enough, but not too long and not too short. The other thing that I also recommend doing is taking that job description and analyzing it using AI if you can't, if you haven't done it for yourself, using AI to generate the top 10 core competencies critical for success in that role. And then you can use those 10 core competencies to build stories from your previous experience to help you then answer almost any interview question. So say one of the core competencies is leadership. I might reflect back on my experience in leadership. What situations have I acted as a leader, whether informal or formal? Where did things go really well? Where could have things gone better? Think of some of those examples around the competency of leadership. And then as I've started to build some stories on those examples, I'll be able to answer almost any question that comes up about the competency of leadership. So that was kind of a crash course on what to do when it comes to preparing for an interview. But the best way to reduce your own stress and anxiety and fear about interviewing is to feel prepared. And you do that through the things I've just mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm going to go one step further, I think, and say like Abby is being very polite and everything, but I would say that if you are going through this where you feel you're not very good at interviews, you feel very pessimistic about your performance in interviews, you find them very unpleasant because you feel that you're not doing very well at them, and you're not a natural and all this kind of stuff. It's like, if that's how you feel and you want to actually fix the problem properly, and you're in a position to do this, I would say the way to fix that properly would be to work with a career coach, maybe even more than one. If you have the time, you have a little bit of money, that would be the perfect solution, because that's the point of career coaches. They don't just give you, little platitudes and little, things you can try. They work with you, and the primary source of value is that you're doing pretend job interviews with them. And yes, it serves as practice and everything, but the real value is getting that feedback. They say, like, listen, honestly, this is how I think you're doing. This is, the strong parts. These are what I consider to be the weak parts. And this is what I recommend for you to do specifically to work on those weak parts. And that can help sort of rehabilitate your performance and get you not only to where you're doing a better job in interviews, but you also feel like you're doing a better job, which you are. You know what I mean? Like that would be the tool to fix the problem in this.
Yes.
Working with friends and family members, I mean, that's good. That's fine for a lot of people. But if you really need that insight into maybe what you're doing that might be a turnoff or ineffective, that's why people hire career coaches specifically.
Yep.
I'm not a career coach. Abby is. Check out her stuff. I think she's too polite to sort of advertise her own stuff right in the moment, but check out her channel and some of the services she provides, because she works with people one-on-one to overcome problems just like this.
Yep. So, and I've worked with clients and I've given them feedback about their body language, their eye contact, whether it's too extreme or a significant lack of eye contact. We kind of debrief and strategize how they answer specific questions that could come up during the interview process. And then we even go through some of the very logistical things that I talked about, how to prepare, how to use AI to help you prepare, how you might conduct your own mock interview with someone else. Once we do a mock interview, there's a lot to it. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that there are so many differing opinions. This is why interviewing is so hard and stressful, because I might say you are set, you've got the perfect interview, persona and technique down. And then you interview with someone and they're like, this is definitely not the right fit. And that's the hard, stressful part about interviewing. But if you feel like you are getting jobs, you're getting interviews, it means your application and your resume are doing the right thing for you. It's doing its job. And now you are doing something in the interview process that is just not connecting with the interviewers. So when you work with someone like me as a career and interview coach, we help you really identify what is going wrong and what you could do differently to get different results. Whether it's your prep process or it's you as a person, how you respond to questions, how you appear physically to the other person, your body language, things like that. And doing it with a career coach gives you a more objective response to who you are and how you're operating in the world. Whereas a friend or a family member might not want to hurt your feelings, so they don't give you.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. That would be my biggest issue with working with a family member or someone, is that you probably just don't. First of all, they don't really, they're not getting a first impression of you, first of all, because they know you intimately, right? So their reaction and their opinion on what you need to improve, that may not be as objective as perhaps certainly a professional who's getting a first impression of you. And then just one thing I want to say, because I encounter this on my channel. I'm not a career coach, but I give advice and stuff. And it's yes, there's a lot of deviation out there. Everything will work some of the time, but that doesn't mean that there's good advice or there's one good method that tends to work well in most situations. You know what I'm saying? And that's what you'd be learning. That's the idea.
Yep.
We've got some other stuff here. So hopefully that was helpful. Lampam, if I'm saying that right. It seems like the market is going away from credentials towards capacity. But then how will we grow and progress if we don't get opportunities to do things to show proof? Transferables aren't helpful. Okay, that's great. You're asking some of the great sort of meta questions here. First of all, I want to take a crack at this, if you don't mind, Abby. First of all, I want to say the first part, yes, but that's not universal. Okay, so like for example, a medical degree is a medical degree, and you need it. Now some of the more modern things you can take qualifications in. Some of them, it's debatable whether they really provide you with that much value in terms of getting a job, what you can apply in terms of skills. So it's very spotty kind of thing. In some areas, yes, the credentials are really not that valuable. In other areas, they're still the absolute like standard, but that people go off. So you need to speak about a specific area. You can't just make a sweeping generalization and then operate off that. But then how will we grow and progress if we don't get opportunities to do things to show proof? Excellent question. Excellent question. You see, what you're starting to do there is you're starting to expose a flaw in the method of public job postings in the posted job market, because that's a situation where you're not allowed to show your value. You have to sit there and talk about your value, right? You, instead of saying like, here, let me show you what I can do here, and you'll see like what I can do for you. Instead of that, you have to sit there. You're not allowed to show anyone. You have to convince them that you can provide value. That's a separate thing. You either have to do that in print, like with words on a resume, and you have to do that by talking verbally in an interview and being assessed on your body language and your rapport and all that kind of stuff. It's still not the same thing as demonstrating your value to them, right? So you're exposing a flaw in there. And this is one of the reasons why getting a job through that method is far from universal. Most people don't get a job going through this process. Yeah. Now, one way of sort of correcting this is, instead of being the person that can say the right thing on a resume or say the right thing in an interview and have convincing body language, instead, when people hire in the hidden job market, one way that they hire people without posting the job is they wait for candidates to contact them. And one of the reasons why that does sort of work is because if the candidate is not interested in doing that job, it's very unlikely they're going to approach the company and initiate contact and say, I don't know if you're hiring, but if you are, consider me because of these reasons, right? That all of that is optional. It's also takes a bit of effort. So that tends to naturally weed out people that are they don't care about that job. So the people that approach you from that angle generally tend to be very enthusiastic and passionate about doing that job specifically for this specific employer. Now, already that weeds out a lot of people that wouldn't work out because they're just not into doing this. You know what I mean? So that's one way you can elevate yourself above the crowd. It has nothing to do with showing your value, but you're showing enthusiasm, you're showing initiative, you're showing all the stuff that's built into that. Professionalism, good communication skills, the ability to persuade, having a rapport, and when they encounter you, they regard you as trustworthy, not giving off obvious red flags. You're showing all that stuff. Is that the same as what you're saying here, like your abilities? No, but it's on the way to it, right? And then, not to make this super long or anything, but the second thing of two that I want to say is that to go one step further, when people are unemployed, depending on what your vocation is, what your skills are and what your abilities are, for many people, it is possible for you to use your own skills while you're unemployed to do something, to create some kind of demonstration of your abilities. So for example, if you were something very obvious, very visual, like a graphic designer or something, you could create all kinds of visual graphic designs and stuff, not for an employer, but just for yourself to have in a little portfolio, so that if somebody says, prove to me that you can handle this job, you say, well, I'm glad you asked. Here's a demonstration. I can do this for you. That's already a cut above what most people at my level can do, and you can see that. So if you know what you're talking about, you recognize that, like, I know my stuff, things like this. So you can use your skills and you can demonstrate them, but you don't do it by following a process. No one's asking you to do this. You have to take it on your own initiative to do all this kind of stuff, right? So anyway, that's the end of my big long rant about it. So hopefully that might be somewhat helpful. I'm not sure.
Yeah, when I think that if there is a job posting, for example, and there are minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications, you must have the minimum qualifications to apply for the job and to have any consideration for it. The preferred
Yes.
qualifications is where things can get interesting, because there are maybe preferred qualifications for that specific job that HR also agrees with. And then there might be some preferred qualifications that, like, the hiring manager specifically wants this person to have. And the hiring manager then has some biases that they're going to say, well, this person doesn't have these skills, so I'm not going to consider them. But this person does have these skills, so I am going to consider them. And that's where I kind of talked at the beginning of our stream today about organizations and hiring managers looking for unicorns, and unicorns don't exist. They are, like, maybe there's a single unicorn out there, but that unicorn finding that specific job in that organization is unlikely.
It turns out to be a rhinoceros.
It turns out to be a rhinoceros or a narwhal.
Isn't that what they thought? That's how they came up with the unicorn. It was a description of, like, a rhinoceros. It was like a horse with a horn on the end, and they're like, so they drew it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to derail your point.
No, it's okay. But a lot of times as a recruiter, I was put in a position where I had to kind of talk the hiring manager or the hiring team away from a really high focus on a certain set of skills, because those skills weren't necessary to do the job. So we need to figure out from an HR, like, interviewer perspective, what is an absolute necessary thing to do the job and be successful in the job from a more technical standpoint, and then what is also something that's nice to have but isn't a complete disqualifier. Then what is necessary from a more personal perspective, like a soft skills. Does this person need to be an exceptional communicator? And how can we figure out if this person has the communication skills without, hiring them into the position just basically on their tech ability, but not on their, soft skill side of things. So I see that this person had a couple comments down. I know we're not trying to do that, but they clarified that if the hiring manager gives advice on skills that they should work on gaining, but it takes like 2 years to gain those additional skills, will they eventually change their requirements, or should you wait 2 years until you have those skills? I would say if it's a minimum qualification, you need to wait to apply if you don't have those skills, and it is a minimum requirement to apply to the job. But if it is a preferred qualification, demonstrating that you're working towards obtaining or achieving that, certification or those additional skills, those are points that will be kind of awarded to you in the consideration process to show that you're kind of working towards that. So that's where you really want to spend time analyzing the job posting or having a discussion with the hiring manager. What is a minimum qualification required to apply and be considered for the position? And what is a nice to have that could bolster your chances of getting the job or your competitiveness with the position, but isn't necessarily the deciding factor of if you're going to be considered or not.
And these things are all fuzzy too. Like, for example, maybe you don't have a skill that one person considers to be a minimum skill for the job, but yet another person thinks that those skills are optional. It's a nice to have, but it's not mission critical that you have it. Maybe, like for example, enthusiasm can partially make up for, perhaps slightly deficient skills in one area if it's not mission critical, and then what is mission critical becomes like a matter of opinion, and maybe several people are all making the decision together. I mean, it's a very fuzzy process. So what I would say is that, you're talking about should you go away for 2 years, get a skill, and then come back? I would apply now. You know what I mean? Like if you can make a case for yourself and you're not like clearly unqualified, like where you can't do the job at all, I don't think there's anything to lose by applying now and making the best case you can for it. If it's a long-term ambition to be in this role, then if you don't get it this time, I would say definitely work towards it, get the skills that they're asking for, and then come back. But like there's no harm in trying for it now. Maybe they will recognize your commitment and maybe how in tune you are to this type of work, and they'll give you a chance. I mean, that does happen too. So that's what I'd say.
I think, like for example, when I first went into recruiting, having a bachelor's degree in really anything was a minimum requirement. So like someone might apply for a job that requires a bachelor's degree, but it doesn't even specify what the bachelor's degree is in. And the bachelor's degree truly doesn't determine if you're going to be successful in a job or not. And so what organizations have started to do is have equivalency language in there, a bachelor's degree or equivalent work experience. And so that could be like 3 years or 5 years or 2 years or 1 year. And you want to look for that. I think that if something is listed as a minimum qualification, something that you are required to have in order to be considered minimally qualified, you need to have those minimum qualifications. Some of them, if there's that equivalency language, can be, a little bit more flexible. But in most cases, if it's a minimum requirement, and you don't have it, then you likely won't be considered for the position. If it's a preferred qualification, but you meet all the minimum qualifications, then absolutely apply no matter what. If you have any questions about it, there's also no harm in trying to identify the person who's responsible for the posting, like a recruiter or the hiring manager, and reaching out to them to have a discussion about it. What's great about that process is it just starts to establish your network with them. You have a connection with them. There's a real person you're talking to. Maybe you can, plead your case, so to speak, to, justify why you could be a good fit for the role, even though you don't have this specific requirement or qualification. And they might be able to bypass some of the systems in place to disqualify you. So if you feel like you could do the job, even though you don't have all the minimum qualifications and you want to talk to someone about it, as a recruiter with my rose-colored glasses on, I would hope that there would be someone that you could contact and have that discussion with, rather than just blindly submitting an application and then never hearing back.
Absolutely. I agree. We've got a question here. Any advice or suggestions on applying for the right hand to the CEO job? Is that like labeled, like targeted at me?
I'm left-handed, so I'm offended.
That's right. It also doesn't take into account for people who don't have hands. Mm-hmm. So, we have to be sensitive. Now, the thing is, okay, if you are serious, I don't think you are, but if you are, this is not a job. Okay. And no one is going to apply to a job. They're not going to post it like that. To get the CEO job at all, or to get the right hand to the CEO job or whatever position that is,
maybe like an executive assistant job? That's kind of what I assumed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, EA, like executive assistant. Yeah. That's a different thing. Mm-hmm. That's just like somebody's glorified receptionist, scheduler, coordinator, that kind of thing. So that's a separate thing. But like, the person who's actually a right hand, meaning that they can offload critical things to that person as if they were themselves doing it, that requires trust. It's not about skill. It's not about qualifications. It's not about time with the company. It's about trust. So you need to build up that trust with the person that has the power to give you that job, which in this example would be the CEO. You'd have to have them trust you like they trust themselves. That's how you get it. So let me ask you, what do you think is involved in achieving that? That's what you have to do.
Yeah. And in most cases, people who end up being the right hand to the CEO have their own job and responsibilities and things that need to get done, in addition to that level of trust and the responsibility that gets put on them by being that right hand.
Yeah. It's like, the other thing is that this kind of, I mean, I know I'm aware that the person asking the question was probably being facetious when they were asking, but it exposes something that I think is enlightening to a lot of job seekers. If you are hearing about, say, the hidden job market, you're hearing about people who get a job based on referrals, and maybe that's not you. You're not tuned into that. So you feel like, look, I've got all the paper qualifications. I've got all the experience anybody could ever want to do that role. But yet I observed that somebody else was promoted into that role instead of them hiring me. They were chosen over me. I think it's unfair. If you look at that person's qualifications, they're inferior to mine from a technical perspective. I think the whole thing's unfair. Therefore, I conclude that it's corrupt. Now, here's where you might be missing something, and that is that that person was not hired because they were the most qualified. That's not why they were hired.
Mm-hmm.
They were hired because the person that job reports to trusts them, right? They don't want someone who's highly qualified, but yet is going to do crazy things, is going to be following their own agenda and their own incentives. Yeah. They want someone that they know will make decisions as if that person themselves in charge would have been making those decisions, right? So it's not about qualifications, it's about trust. And that explains what we sometimes see with people getting hired through networking and stuff like that. It's not some big conspiracy. It's just that they're tuned into trust more than they are raw qualifications.
And honestly, right? This is also what happens with the hiring process in general. Like, if you are the most qualified person, you still might not be the person who gets the job because you haven't been able to demonstrate that you have the other skills necessary to be successful in the role beyond just the basic qualifications of doing the job. Because doing the job is so much more than like the technical actual task work of the job.
Absolutely. Anybody, if you guys ever had a boss that turned out to be an idiot,
yeah.
They've got qualifications, but their judgment is just out to lunch, right? Like, have you ever seen anyone like that, or worse, worked for someone like that? So you know what I'm talking about. Just because you got qualifications doesn't mean you're going to go in there and make all the right decisions. You're going to, you get people like that. They hire because they've got all these qualifications and all this experience. You put them in charge, or you give them some responsibility for something, and they just make the stupidest decisions you could ever imagine. And they think it's a good idea, right? That's what they're trying to insulate themselves for by paying attention to this stuff. So that hopefully can explain some stuff. We only have a few minutes left. Let's see if we can quickly go through some of this stuff. I don't want to ignore anyone here. Okay, so did we do this one? We didn't do this one. If a hiring manager...
Sorry, I skipped it to this one, and then we went back up to the person.
We already did this one? Okay, so I will go to... Because this thing keeps it goes up and down, and it's like I lose where I am here. What about this? Did we do this? I can't remember. Was that the same one?
That's the same one.
Okay, then this one. Thank you for advice, Bill and Abby. I was stressed a bit because I was part of a layoff recently and want to work again. Seeing Dreams. Listen, Seeing Dreams, you're awesome. And the thing about layoffs is, as you know, it has no bearing whatsoever on your abilities or how good you are as an employee. If you were laid off as part of a group, I would definitely say that, because that's even further evidence that there was absolutely nothing wrong with you. It was just a company that got themselves into some hot water or something.
Yep.
Spaceflight Dreaming says, thank you for your responses. I am prior service Navy with backgrounds in aviation, weather, and computers. That's a nice, diverse base there. The whole time as a civilian, no one gave me an interview after applying for many things over 10 years. So over 10 years, you didn't get an interview. I finally got into Amazon with no interview, but now it's time to try moving up again to better positions. Well, yeah, listen, this is a great opportunity for you, Spaceflight Dreaming, to really work on some of the interpersonal skills and communication skills that are necessary. The good news is that if you can master the stuff that you've mastered, with aviation and, all this kind of stuff, computers, this stuff is child's play in comparison, but it is still a thing to be taken seriously, and you got to work on it with the same rigor that you would work on anything else. So this might be a great opportunity for you to really round out your skills and shine.
Yep. And when you are, I'm making some assumptions here and maybe generalizations as well, but when you have those types of very technical backgrounds, sometimes you're more comfortable with the systems that you work with and the people that you work with. And that's why working with a career coach, someone like me, or if you're in the United States, someone at your workforce center, can be really helpful to your overall job search success, because they can help you really tune in and hone those people skills that are critical for getting a job through the interview process.
Absolutely. Just some stuff at the end here says, "Hi, Abby. Nice to see you."
Good to see you too.
Yeah. I've been thinking about creating a portfolio. Good. We were talking about that earlier, right? That's good. Let's see here. We've got, thanks so much for your insight. You're absolutely welcome. And thank you for being here and participating. Thank you to everybody who, availed themselves of the Q&A thing. We got some great questions today. What about building your YouTube and TikTok pages to also showcase your skills? Yes, that's definitely a thing. You could do that. But I wouldn't just do it blindly. If you're going to do this thing that requires quite a bit of work, I would have a very clear plan how you're going to use it. And I would also validate that, like, for example, if you think you're going to show it to people or you're going to get them to go and check out your YouTube channel or your TikTok page, make sure that the people that you're trying to target are open to doing that, because you don't want to go through all this work to find out that, like, no, they don't really do that. They're not really familiar with TikTok, so they don't do it. That would be a terrible shame. So try and validate that by talking to some of the people you're targeting to see if they are open to that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And having a YouTube channel or a TikTok page, depending on how you choose to use it, could essentially be your portfolio. So
Yes.
You can demonstrate your value and the things that you are capable of through those different channels and pages. But again, it's only worth your time if the people who will be hiring you find value in that as well. So for example, I have a background in training and development. Making videos, teaching people how to do things can be really helpful because it shows not only my development of a training program, but it also shows my facilitation skills and maybe some of my creativity and innovation skills. But if I'm going to apply to do something in data analytics and I'm doing my type of YouTube channel, the people who are hiring me for data analytics probably don't care about my training and development YouTube channel.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people send me, like, I guess you could call it like links to a portfolio or some kind. I've always been receptive to like checking out somebody's link or whatever. But the thing is, I think that not that many people realize is that if someone checks out your link to whatever portfolio or whatever example you have, make it so that it's obvious. Like, just in the first 5 seconds, they're hit with something of very high quality, your big selling point. Do that, like, because nobody's going to go through an entire YouTube channel to, like, get to know you or whatever. It's almost like recruiters looking at resumes. Like, how many seconds is it, Abby, that you only have, like, is it 6 seconds?
Yep,
on average?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like they're not going to read your whole like resume, so that the real gold is on page 2 down at the bottom. It's like, no, it has to be super obvious. Like, you hit them immediately with, like, this is the big compelling reason why you would check me out. So just get tuned into that if you're going to take this approach.
Yep.
And finally, Spaceflight Dreaming says, yes, I'm more comfortable with things than people. LOL. Congratulations, you're a typical dude. That's like, guys, I think, are more tuned into things. In general, women are more tuned into people. That's my understanding. Starting to realize too that I really don't know these interpersonal skills or body language people use. That's where someone like Abby, I imagine, can really, really work wonders for you in terms of being able to work with you as a career coach. A lot of value.
This person has already taken the first step of recognizing that, because a lot of people, if they don't believe that they are maybe lacking in that area, they're not open to hearing that feedback. And then there's no point in working with, on that topic. But if you recognize that you might struggle a little bit with the interpersonal side of things or the people side of things, body language, eye contact, smiling, small talk, those sorts of things, then if you recognize that you don't have those skills, then you're open to the feedback on how you can build those skills, which is step number 1.
Yeah, that's step number 1. Bow tie, thick rim glasses, Brill cream, clicking salute. There we go. Step 2 is even more creative.
Uh-huh.
Thank you to everybody who participated today. You guys are awesome. We will be back in January doing this, I believe, on regular, hopefully, basis. So check out our respective channels for when we're doing this again. And hopefully you've gained something from this. We wish you every luck in your job search efforts and
Yes.
best of luck for 2026.
Happy New Year, everyone. We
Yeah.
are turning over from 2025 to 2026. And, having a big, just calendar change like this can really jumpstart some people's job search and give them some inspiration and motivation to do something different. So good luck, and we'll see you in our next live stream.
Yes, and you are going to be fine. Remember that. Thanks for watching. You guys are awesome. Take care.
Bye, everyone.